Hello, my name is Bryant Law. Today we'll be going over the flocculation and sedimentation system. I will cover things such as setup of the system, as well as using the HMI screens for control of the system. Before you begin running your system, I would advise you to first take care of all physical setup items covered in subsequent parts of this video. Then, once the physical setup is complete, to visit the System Config, Remote Start, and Process Control screens on the HMI to configure your settings before running the system. After these items have been completed, you can put the system in service and begin to fill up the system. This system can be powered by 120 volts AC or 240 volts AC. To change between the two voltages, a jumper needs to be adjusted in order to use the other voltage. Generally, skids are shipped from the factory configured for the voltage that will be used on site. If the system is configured for 120 volts AC, it will have a cable connected to it with the appropriate 120 volt AC 20 amp plug. With the system configured to this mode, you can plug the system directly into a standard 20 amp wall outlet. Before you put any water in the system, you will need to adjust the manual valves so the water will flow correctly. Shown on the screen is a table of valve positions grouped based on configuration for you to refer to when setting up the system. Later in this video, I will cover what those modes are so you can make an informed decision about which modes to use. After turning on the system, you will see the HMI begin to power up. After it is finished powering up, you will see a screen that looks like the one I have displayed. On this screen, you will be able to click on any of the control buttons on this screen, except the two buttons located in the lower right corner of the screen. In order to gain access to the system, you will first need to log into the HMI. Your current login level is displayed in the upper left corner. The default user is guest. To log in, you need to click on the login button. When clicked on, it will open up this login screen. On this screen, you will be able to choose your login level and input a password by clicking on the password box. You then input your password and press the green check mark. If you have typed in the correct password, after you click login, you will see the current login change to the new login level. As you can see, the login level changed now to the view login. Each of these login options have a different password and give you different levels of control with the system. This allows you to regulate the system in regards to which people are able to do certain things. To give you an idea of the differences in login levels, I have a table I can show you to give you a visual. This is a generic table that is used on all Intuitech systems. It can be used as a reference for what each login level gives you access to. For example, the view login, which we just logged into, is unable to reset alarms or make changes to pump set points. We will provide these passwords to the manager over the project and leave the decision on how to distribute them to the manager's discretion. Intuitech does not distribute the admin level login, since it exists mostly for testing purposes and configuring hardware. One thing to note on the login levels is that the view, operator, or engineer logins do not automatically log out. In order to prevent tampering of the system, we advise that you log out of the system when you aren't working on the system physically or remotely. When logged out of the system, it will still run and log data readings, but It will prevent tampering from anyone who may pass by the system, since they will not be able to make any changes on the HMI. The screen that is shown when the system boots up is the overview screen. If you ever need to return to this screen later, it can be found by pressing the Overview button shown in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. On this screen, you can turn the system on by pressing the Service button. When in service, the system will follow the code inside the PLC and turn on things such as pumps, mixers, or motorized valves. To turn the system back off, simply press the Offline button. When running the system in service, you may experience alarms and warnings. In the case of an alarm, it will stop the skid from running to protect users and equipment. A warning will not shut the system down, but it is there to make you aware of something that has occurred. In the center of the screen, you can see readouts of various items, such as inlet flow, turbidity, or pH. In addition, you can see the current status of the system. You will notice some boxes appear to pop out, while others appear to be recessed. The boxes that appear to pop out are boxes that can be interacted with, or in other words, clicked on. For example, all boxes that look like the inlet flow box open up a similar screen. When clicked on, this screen will show you a quick trend of the readings of that sensor, in addition to give you the option to load those readings into the main trending screen. The details of loading and looking at the main trending screen will be covered later in this video. Depending on how the sensor is configured, you may sometimes see in the bottom left corner boxes for low and high limits. These boxes can be used to configure a customizable low or high warning. To customize it, simply press on the box and input the value that you want that warning to trigger at. For example, if we want the inlet flow meter, which we have selected, to throw a low warning when the flow rate is below 2 GPM, you simply put in 2. Now when the system is in service and the flow rate is below 2 GPM, the system will show a low warning. The process menu can be located at the bottom of the screen next to the Overview button. When clicked on, it will bring up a screen like the one shown. From this screen, you will be able to navigate to a number of different screens that allow you to configure and run your system. For example, to access the Process screen, simply click on the Process button. On this screen, you can configure the controls for items such as feed pumps and mixers, in addition to being able to put the system into service and offline mode. You can also see a representation of the flocculation and sedimentation skid to show you how the water will flow through it. With the symbols on this system, you will notice that they will change color between green and red. When the symbol is red, that object is turned off. When that symbol is green, that object is running, whether it be a feed pump or a mixer. To configure the rate of water pumped through the system, you will want to click on the pump object to open up the pump control screen. The pump control screen has a number of settings on it that we will need to cover. The first is your device control. The device control tells the system how you want the pump to be controlled. There are 3 modes that you can set it to: auto, on, or off. All mixers, chem pumps, and motorized valves will have these 3 modes available to them. If it is set to the auto mode, the system will control that device according to how the system has been programmed. For example, with the feed pump, the system will only turn it on when the system is set to service mode and while it isn't in a shutdown alarm. If the pump, mixer, or valve is set to on mode, it will immediately turn on and not follow the program logic. If the pump, mixer, or valve is set to off mode, then it won't ever turn on even if the system is trying to run. Please note, if you set a pump, mixer, or motorized valve to on or off mode, you will see that object turn yellow, and a warning will appear on the alarm screen. This is to let you know that you have taken them out of auto mode. Generally speaking, you will want to keep everything in auto mode to avoid any erratic behavior. The main exception to this rule is chemical pumps, since you will only want to turn on the number of chemical pumps you need to pump the chemicals into the system. The next setting to look at is the pump mode. The pump has an auto and manual mode. With the pump mode in auto, it will try and pump at a specified flow rate that you can put in. You will notice there are limits to what the values can be put in for the flow rate. If you set it to manual mode, you can set the pump to a defined percentage between 0 and 100%. As you can see, the limits for the input are between 0 and 100%. Above the mode selection, you'll see that there is a process flow rate and output percentage. This is to tell you your current flow rate and the output percent on how hard the pump is running. The PID trend shows a display of 3 different items. At the top, it displays a quick trend of how hard the pump is working between 0 and 100%. Below it is a quick trend of the auto set point, shown in green, and the current process flow rate, shown in teal. As you can see, as you change the auto set point, the green line will move down, and you will see the flow rate as it updates. The PID configuration parameters located next to the PID trend are the parameters that affect how the pump controls its percent output to meet your flow set point. Generally, the PID parameters do not need to be adjusted as they are tuned at the factory. The PID alarms are there to set up a warning if your pump is for some reason unable to reach the set point you have defined. How these parameters work is if the flow rate is outside of the deadband continuously for longer than the alarm delay, you will get a warning. For example, if the auto set point is set to 2 GPM, the deadband to 1 GPM, and the delay for 120 seconds, then if the flow rate detected is greater than 3 GPM or less than 1 GPM for more than 120 seconds continuously, a warning will appear. The final thing for this screen is there are some readouts on the motor and its VFD. These are mostly diagnostic parameters for determining the state of the motor and its VFD. In regards to the inlet flow rate on the outlet of the feed pump, there is a hard-coded low shutdown alarm that if the system flow rate falls below 0.2 GPM, the system will initiate a shutdown. This is to protect the system from running dry due to loss of feed water. The rapid mixers can be accessed by clicking on these symbols above the rapid mix basin. The Floc mixers can be accessed by clicking on these symbols above the Floc basin. There are 3 of each type on this system that I am showing. The screen that they will bring up is identical between the Rapid Mix and Floc mixers. On this screen, there is an auto, on, off device mode that I explained earlier when talking about the feed pump. In addition to that, there is an auto and manual control for the Rapid and Floc mixers, which is the same principle as the feed pump manual and auto set point. The only difference is that instead of using a flow rate, you have a G value, which is indicative of the mixing gradient in the basin. The manual mode is the same as the feed pump, where you have to set the mixer to a value between 0 and 100%. Above the manual and auto set point, we have an output display showing the percentage of the output that the mixer is running at, as well as the calculated RPM that the mixer is turning at. One detail to note is that the mixers need to be on at least 3% for them to be turning physically. Located under the Floc basins, you will see the detention time of the water in the Floc basins. This value is calculated from the volume, the amount of active Floc basins, and the flow of the water through the system. The hydraulic retention time is how long the water will be in the settling basin based on its volume and the flow rate of water through the system. The surface loading rate is calculated based off the flow rate and the projected area between the plates in the settling basin. The sludge sweeper page can be accessed by pressing on this symbol. It can also be accessed by going to the Process menu and clicking on Sludge System. You can access control to the basin lights by clicking on the basin light symbol. This gives you the option to have the system control the lights based on the PLC programming or to turn them on and off as you please. The feed pump suction readout is a pressure sensor that reads the pressure on the suction side of the feed pump. It is placed in that location to allow the user to know when the strainer on the inlet of the system is getting dirty. As it gets dirty, the pressure will drop or even go negative. This has a hard-coded alarm in the system that will shut the system down if the suction pressure goes below -2 psi to ensure that the system won't damage itself. The pH and turbidity are also displayed on this screen on the lower left-hand side. The pH probes are designed so that you can physically move them in locations on the system to measure different parts of the system. This system has been customized to have 4 external mixers that are not physically connected to the system, but that go into tanks that are near the system. To control these mixers, you will need to click on the corresponding mixer symbol. Besides the standard auto, on, off control for these mixers, you can set the output percentage of the mixer. And finally, these mixers can be set to have a timed control if you do not wish for them to run continuously. They will run simply by turning on for a defined duration and then turning off for a defined duration and then repeating. If you wish for the mixer to run continuously, simply set the off time to 0. To access the system configuration screen, first click on Process menu, followed by System config. On this screen, there are 3 parameters you will need to select to configure your system. The first setting is the amount of active Floc basins you will be using. This tells the system how many of the flocculation basins you want to use. Depending on the type of tests that you want to do, you may want to use less floc basins than available on your system. In this example, the system has 3 floc basins. The amount of active floc basins affects your total floc time and the number of active mixers and how you configure your manual valves. To change the amount of active basins, simply click on the number of active basins you want. This will update the calculations in the PLC as well as show changes on the HMI process screen. The inactive basins will start from the left and grow to the right as you decrease the number of active basins. Remember to physically update the hand valves on the system to match. Please refer to the valve table to know which valves you need to adjust. You will also need to plug the baffles between the basins, the active and inactive basins, to prevent water from flowing into the inactive basins and becoming stagnant. This is accomplished by using the provided plug in the spare parts bin. These plugs can be inserted into the baffle holes between the basins. Then you twist the handle to tighten them such that they seal the hole. The second setting is the sedimentation mode. This mode has 2 available settings. Sedimentation mode uses the sedimentation basin to settle out the floc from the water before it is sent out the settled water pipe. Sedimentation mode also has the additional function of using a sludge sweeper to gather up sludge as it is settled into the bottom of the sedimentation basin. Direct filtration bypasses the sedimentation basin and sends water directly out the settled water pipe while it contains the floc. Direct filtration mode also disables the sludge sweeper. Please note that you do need to physically adjust valves and insert plugs into the system when selecting this mode. Setting the mode tells the system how you have configured it so it can run correctly. Refer to the valve table shown for valve configurations. If you are using direct filtration mode, you will need to put plugs in the 3rd floc basin. This is to prevent water from flowing to the sedimentation basin instead of going out the settled water pipe. On the screen, I have an image of the 2 plugs you will want to use in the 3rd flocculation basin. These are shipped with the system. I also have an image of the inside of the 3rd flocculation basin to show you which of the 2 ports you need to screw the plugs into. The final setting on this page is the number of plates you have chosen to have in the sedimentation basin. You will want to input the number of plates you have in the sedimentation basin so the system can update the calculations that are affected by knowing the number of plates in the system. To access the remote start screen, you must first click on Process menu and then the remote start button. On this screen, there are 3 parameters you will need to select to configure the system. The first is the remote operation setting. The purpose of this setting is if the system is being fed water from another system and you want the system to be able to control when the flocculation and sedimentation system runs and stops. When this setting is set to off, the user can control if the system is in service or offline simply by pressing these buttons on the overview or process screens. When in remote operation, the system waits for a 24-volt DC symbol to be input into the PLC on a specified port. When it sees this signal, it waits for the remote start delay time before going into service. The PLC also has a dedicated port for outputting an alarm signal back to the control system if anything should go wrong. If you wish to use this feature, please contact Intuitech Technical Support for details on compatibility and how to connect to other systems. The third setting is the automatic power fail restart. If the system detects a loss of power, the system will experience a shutdown alarm. This will turn off all the pumps, mixers, and motorized valves that are in auto mode. If this setting is set to yes, the system will, after waiting for the remote start delay duration, turn the system back on and continue running as it was before the power fail. If the setting is set to no, the system will stay in a shutdown alarm state until a user manually resets the alarm. The sludge system screen controls how the sludge sweeper runs. On this screen, you will see a number of things. In the lower left-hand corner, you have two parameters you can control on the sludge sweeper. That is the delay time and the flush time. The way the sweeper works is it sits in the away position for the delay time. Generally, you want this delay time to be sufficiently long to build up about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of sludge in the bottom of the basin. Then, after the delay time has elapsed, the sweeper begins a flush operation. This operation starts with flushing water from the away position. This flush in place lasts for the duration of the flush time. Once that has been completed, the sweeper will move across the basin and suck up the sludge along the bottom. Once it reaches the home position, it will flush in place again for the flush time before returning to the away position. In the top left, you will see the location of the sweeper. Please note that the home location is on the side of the basin with the sludge sweeper's motor. The away position is on the far side from the basin, the sweeper's motor. Below that is a timer for how long the last travel of the sweeper took to go from one side of the basin to the other. In addition to that, there is the flush and delay time countdowns for how long before they proceed to the next step. To control the flow rate of the sludge sucked out of the system, simply press on the sludge waste valve. This screen is identical in function and appearance to the feed pump screen. To control the flow rate of the sludge sucked out of the system, simply select the auto set point that you desire and close the screen. The final thing you need to note on this screen is that some of the controls have been disabled for all login levels. This is done to prevent crashing of the sludge sweeper into the basin walls and stalling out the motor. The chemical system screen can be accessed by clicking on the process menu button, followed by the chemical system button on the process menu screen. On this screen are potentially multiple chemical pumps, chemical tanks, and chemical mixers. The quantity will depend on the system and the application it's used for. The chemical tank has a vertical bar that turns green depending on the level that the tank is filled to. It also has a gallons readout of how many gallons are currently in the chemical tank. To set up the controls for the chemical pump, simply click on the chemical pump symbol you wish to configure. This opens up the control page for the chemical pumps. Each chemical pump has a device control with auto, on, and off, as talked in the feed pump control section. These chemical pumps also have 4 modes that the chemical pumps can be set to, which is pace, trim, PID, or comp. The most common chemical pump control mode is the pace mode. Pace mode uses the flow rate and the information you provide to dose the system with the specified milligrams per liter rate, or using a manual set point, set the pump to a manual speed. The information you need to provide the chemical pump is in the configuration section. You will need to put in the chemical concentration in pounds per gallon of the active chemical that you will be putting in your tank. Next, you will need to calibrate the chemical pumps with the pump max and the pump min. The pump max is obtained by using the calibration column and the calibration procedure to determine the maximum pumping rate that the pump can pump into the system in milliliters per minute. The pump min flow rate is very similar to the pump max and uses the same procedure, except for the output percentage of the pump is 3% instead of 100%. Above the auto manual mode are a number of indicators of how the chemical pump is running. The flow variable is the flow of water in the system that the pace control logic is pacing the chemical pump to. The output percentage is the percentage the pump is running at to hit the milligrams per liter set point. The flow per day is the amount of gallons that is going to be added per day at the flow set point that the system is flowing at currently. The flow in milliliters per minute is the converted milligrams per liter into milliliters per minute flow rate. And your dose is the milligrams per liter dose that you are currently adding to your system. Sometimes you don't want to control based on the chemical dose, but instead based off pH. This is accomplished by using either the trim or the PID modes. The PID mode continuously changes the chemical added to the system, similar to how the feed pump water into the system. The trim mode is a non-continuous version that is better suited to account for the delay time between adding a chemical and seeing its effects. Generally, we recommend using only the trim mode over the PID mode, since it has safety features that you can use to prevent overdosing and get more stable control. As you see, trim mode has the same configuration settings as pace mode, but in addition to that, you have other items you need to configure. The way trim mode works is when the pump is turned on, it will start with outputting the chemical rate defined in the auto set point. It will continue to put out chemical into the system at this rate for the entire interval that is defined here. After that time interval is over, the system will look at the pH probe that you have selected to see if the pH it is measuring, as shown here, matches the feedback set point or is within the deadband of the pH. If it is within the deadband range of the system, it will keep the chemical dose the same. If the pH reading is outside of the deadband, the dose will be changed by the dose step size. The system will determine if it needs to add more or less based on what kind of chemical you're adding. You will need to tell the system if the chemical you are adding is caustic or acid, so it can add more or less chemical based on its readings. After the system has increased or decreased the dose, it will again wait for the time interval shown here before re-evaluating if it again needs a higher or lower chemical flow rate. The maximum and minimum dose rates are parameters you will need to set that will limit the dose that can be put into the system. This will prevent adding way too much chemical to the system in case something goes wrong. The PID control mode is very similar to how the feed pump is controlled. in the fact that all you need to do is input your pH set point, and the system will tune to attempt to reach that pH. The main complications as to why the PID mode is not often used is that it will require you to manually tune to control it to these parameters, and the fact that there are no limits on the chemical addition, so you may end up with adding too much or too little chemical. The comp mode requires you to reverse the tubing in order for this mode to work. What this mode does is pull a composite sample from the system into your chemical tank. To do this, you input the number of samples you want and the time duration between samples. Then you need to put in the volume for each sample you want to pull and how fast you want it pulled from the tank. Then you simply turn it on. The chemical mixer has a very simple control logic to it. Besides the standard device control that was covered in the feed pump section, you have a manual percent. You set it to so it knows how fast to run. You can have the mixer run either continuously or intermittently. It will turn on and run for as long as the on time, and then will turn off for as long as the off time. After that, it will repeat. If you want it to run continuously, simply set the off time to 0. Now to cover a couple notes on the chemical system. Each chemical cabinet has a leak detector inside of it. If the leak detector detects fluid in the cabinet, it will shut down the corresponding chemical pumps. As you can see here, chemical cabinet 2 has detected a leak and has the yellow alarm box activated for the chem pumps. And if I try to turn them on, they will not turn on. Also, remember, for pumping chemicals into the system from the chemical tank, you will need both valves below the chemical pump to be in their down position in order for them to pump from the tank into wherever you have your chemical tubing put. Thirdly, please confirm the chemical compatibility of the chemical you will be adding to the system before you put it in the system. There are some chemicals that are incompatible with various plastics and metals. The last item is these chemical pumps are peristaltic pumps. What this means is the pump head physically compresses and moves the tubing that goes through it. The downside of using this type of pump is that the tubing will eventually wear out. Make sure to regularly check the tubing and to shift or replace the tubing as needed. The DC power screen can be found by going to the process menu and clicking on the DC power button. This screen is a diagnostic screen mainly for Intuitech use. It shows the amperage of each of the DC breakers in the system. In addition, it shows the total amps drawn and the DC voltage put out by the DC power supply. The system has a full screen trending option that is also available to be used. To add a parameter to the trending screen, first go to where that parameter is displayed. All parameters in these boxes can be added to the trending screen. To add a parameter to the main trending screen, simply click on the load box to add it to the trending screen under a corresponding pen color. The trend screen can be accessed by clicking on the trend button at the bottom of the screen. If you wish to hide one of the trend pens located in the top left corner of the screen, you can hide it simply by pressing the Hide button. When you are ready to see that parameter again, simply press the Show button. On the trend screen, if you click anywhere on it, you will see a blue line appear where you click. This blue line will measure the current time, which is the x-axis, and the y-axis, which is the readings. So for the temperature probe, the reading at 16:47:21 is 56.4. You can adjust the time period shown on the x-axis by clicking on the duration button and then selecting the time span that is desired. To the right of the duration button is an auto and manual mode. Auto mode will keep the right axis aligned with present time. Manual mode will allow you to look back at past incidents that are outside of your current time duration. To look back, simply press the double arrow that points to the left. It will take you back one time duration. As you can see, it took me back 24 hours because my duration is set for 24 hours. If I want to go back up 24 hours, I simply press the double arrow to the right. If you wish to adjust the scaling of one of the trend items for the y-axis, simply select the item you wish to adjust the scaling on, and then change the y-max and y-min parameters. The Alarms button will take you to a screen that shows current and past alarms on the system. If there is a current alarm, you will see the alarm button either flashing or solid red. Warnings will be displayed with flashing or solid yellow, unless there is an alarm going off. Once in the alarm screen, you will see a list of current alarms or warnings in the system. The chemical cabinet X720 leak detect alarm is a common alarm that will occur if you have a leak detected in your cabinet or fluid. Alarms or warnings can be reset simply by pressing the alarm reset button. But if an alarm is still active, it will return to the alarm list. Depending on how you run your system, you may have warnings based on how you configured it, such as turning off a pump or a mixer. You can acknowledge this by pressing Alarm Acknowledge. You will then see the red or yellow light stop flashing and go to a solid color. This indicates that the alarm or warning has been acknowledged. If a new alarm or warning occurs, you will see the solid box go from solid back to flashing. This is indicating that a new alarm or warning has appeared. On this screen, you can also look at previous alarms that have been cleared. If you click on the Alarm History button, you will get a list of past alarms and warnings that have occurred in the system. To go back to the active alarm list, simply press Alarm Summary. The Settings button will take you to the Data Logging, Date and Time, Email, Miscellaneous, and Save Restore Parameters screens. The first of which is the Data Logging screen. On the Data Logging screen, you can configure how the data logger runs. You can set the data logger to auto, in which case the logging will only happen when the system is in service. On will have the system continuously log data as long as the system is powered. Off will disable data logging. The interval sets how often the data is written to the USB located in the front panel of the electrical enclosure. To retrieve data logged on the USB, you can do this one of two ways. The less often used way requires you to power down the HMI before you remove it from the front panel. Then you physically remove the USB. The second way, which is the more commonly used way, is to retrieve the data using remote connection to the HMI, using Ultra VNC and then downloading the files. When connected remotely, you will have this extra bar up here. To remotely access the logged files, simply click on this button. Clicking on this button will open up the file transfer window. In this file transfer window, on the left you will have your computer and on the right the HMI. To access the logged data on the HMI, go down to the E drive and you'll see your logged data in the CSV files. To transfer them to your computer, select a location on your computer. You can create a new folder and go to that folder. Now to copy the files, highlight the files you wish to send and click Receive. You will see now the files have been copied to the desktop. After you have finished copying your files to the desktop, make sure to remove the old files on the HMI by using the delete command. This is done to prevent the file from getting too large for the HMI to handle, too large to transfer via remote connection, and to prevent data loss. Intuitech suggests that you back up weekly to prevent any loss of data. When you click over to the date and time screen, you can adjust the date and time shown in the top right corner. This makes it so your logged data will show the true date and time for the local time zone that you are in. To change the time, you will press the Edit button, adjust the time to the time that you want, and press the Set Time button. You will see the time changes to match what you had set it to. When you go over to the email screen, you can put in your email to the system so that when there is new alarms and warnings, you will get an email. Please note that the limit to the amount of emails that can be put in here is a limit of 2 emails. To put an email into the system, turn on the email option and press Edit. Here you will type in the email that you want. If you want to put in the second email, make sure to separate the second email via a semicolon. Please make sure to double check the spelling of your emails, as an incorrect email will result in no email being sent. The miscellaneous page is mainly for Intuitech diagnostic and testing purposes and does not really contain any interesting information. The Save and Restore Parameters screen is where you can save parameters that you have configured the system with. Then, if you play with the parameters of the system but can't remember your old parameters, you can use the Restore Parameters button to reload those parameters into the system. If for some reason you need to restore the system back to factory default parameters, you can press the Restore Factory Parameters button to restore. Generally, you will not need to use the IO-Link screens. These screens are used for diagnostics if a sensor gets unplugged or has issues. You will want to look at these pages when you get a general IOLM/AO/AI warning. The corresponding IOLM, AO, or AI module will be highlighted to tell you which one is having an issue. The Power Off HMI button brings up a screen with 3 buttons. The first button is to power off the HMI. You will want to do this before you turn off the main disconnect switch on the system. This is because the HMI is a Windows computer and needs to be properly shut down instead of just killing power to it. If you need to cycle power on the HMI, that can be accomplished by using the second button. The last button is an admin-only button that will close the application software and allow the admin to make changes to the Windows operating system as needed. Thank you for your time. If you have additional questions, please feel free to contact us at techsupport@intuitech.com.